What's up, everybody? It's your friend Isaac with Big Bike BMX, and today we are back with another jam-packed interview that I'm super psyched about. Craig was like, "Hey, dude, we have this opportunity." I was like, "Dude, jump on it. Try and make this happen." And then I get a text at work, "Man, we got it." And so this you're about to watch what went down. So, Craig, tell me about our guest today. Give us an intro.
Well, let me tell you what, there's a billion different ways I could do this. So I'm just going to make it short and sweet tonight. On the show, Isaac, we have a really, really special guest. And yes, like you, I'm really stoked to have him here tonight. He's a BMX Hall of Famer. He's a two-time King of Vert champ. He's a world record holder and so many more things, brother. You may know him from the Haro freestyle team. Tonight, Isaac, welcome everybody. Our special guest here on Big Bike BMX, Mr. Brian Blyther. Brian, welcome to the show.
Brian, Laramie, Wyoming's favorite tourist, Brian Blyther in the house.
All right. How you guys doing?
Man, stoked you're here. Stoked that you decided to come and hang out with us. Dude, it is such a pleasure. And I've been dying to do this since we had the Haro team on. When we surprised Craig, and that in itself was hilarious to us.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a good night,
dude. That was fun. So y'all, before, if you want to see that interview, I'll put a little card up in the top that basically tells you, hey, go check this out. You can watch an interview with Brian, Dave Norrie, Ron Wilkerson, and Craig and I, where we surprised Craig. Craig had no idea what this was happening, so go watch that. But I kind of wanted to get into what it was like you personally and what that was like, because there's so many iconic photos of Brian Blyther, right? Everybody's seen the picture that's huge air with the seat up in your gut. It seemed like that was every air out at Pipeline. And I think that's where I remember you most, from skate park riding. Before it, basically, I remember Brian Blyther, the skate park rider, then the vert touring guy, inventor of my favorite trick, the tail whip. Y'all, if you didn't know that, thank Brian Blyther for the foot jam tail whip. But dude, I saw this picture of you, Brian, from Bill Batchelor, and it was like you just in some jeans doing like a tabletop at like some hills in like a field. And I was like, dude, it just brought me back from, like, I had this like haloed Brian Blyther god. And it's like that photo brought me back to, like, no, dude, Brian Blyther rode bikes around his neighborhood just like you did tricks just like you did. I'm fascinated by that, dude. Tell me, like, how you started. You don't have to go like my first bike, but when did you notice, like, man, I'm kind of good at this, or like, right, people tell me I'm good at this. I don't know, like, tell me about that era.
Well, I have a 5-year-old brother, or a brother that's 5 years older. He was into skateboarding. So early on, we went to the Baldy Pipe and actually went to the Pipeline. I went to the Pipeline a couple times as a skateboarder, actually several times, because bikes weren't allowed in. And I kind of rode on his coattails and everywhere they went. But the few times I remember that I had something, or they were telling me like they were impressed, was when we set up some jumps, and they would do the jumping thing. They all rode BMX too, but they were mostly skateboarders. But they would jump and do the little line with the foot, and I would jump and I would pass it like 3 or 4 feet, and they would all just trip out. Pretty soon they just didn't want to jump with me anymore. But one of their friends was a photographer, so he invited me every time. And then at that point, my brother, kind of told me, "Hey, dude, you're good." And I kind of started feeling that, I'm at least as good as my brother's friends. I didn't think much past that, but that was kind of the first time I thought that, yeah, this is a good time.
Dude, exactly. And that's what, before contests, before, you had that kind of stuff in the magazines. That's what it was, you guys. It was like, who could bunny hop the farthest, who could jump over the most kids. Like, you see those pictures, most of the time it's like, yeah, they cleared it, but you know what I mean? That's how you tested your friendships. It was like, how many people totally jump over, like we all did that. That's awesome. So thinking about those days, like, do you remember your crew of like normal people, or did you, and this is for me, like, this is the part I'm dying to know, like, behind the scenes Brian Blyther, because in my mind, reading, the way I remember it, Brian Blyther just hung out with Eddie Fiola and everybody else that I had on my walls. You know, him and Mike Dominguez probably hang out every day after school, and they just shred. And it's, you know, but there's got to be those stories in between, you know, that and what we growing up thought, and kind of the stories that we built. But, you know, were you a neighborhood legend? Did you just roll with a bunch of dudes that were like as good as you? Did we know them? Did we not know them? That kind of, I'm curious about that.
So I think the first time where I realized that I was kind of the dude in the neighborhood that was talked about in BMX. I mean, when people would like drop off license plates on my front porch that had, you know, something BMX or BMX 000, whatever it was, I was kind of tripping out. And then my brother knew this a friend of his that lived down the street in about an acre property, and they were punk rockers, and they had a punk band, and they played all the time. Well, they also had a 8-foot half pipe. And so I went down there one time, they invited me down there, and I rode, and there was never a weekend past that time where they didn't invite me to come ride while they were playing and skating. They all skated, and it was just a full punk scene, and I'd ride a BMX. And I remember they would just always trip out. Everyone would just kind of stop and watch. And it was actually pretty cool. It was a little bit intimidating, but it was super fun. And then from that time on, my brother built a quarter pipe in our front yard, and it was at the top of our driveway, so it was uphill. But you know, people would park in the street, and you know, and you know, his friends, my friends, they would all be there, and we would blast a quarter pipe, and it was pretty fun.
Yeah, man, not a lot of people can say they built a quarter pipe in their front yard. You know, usually like the mom and dad are like, yo, you can put that in the backyard, dude. So what was that like with all your, you know, your neighborhood buddies coming over hitting the front yard quarter pipe?
Yeah, it got to a point to where you know, my parents thought about putting a chain on it, or doing something, because we would hear kids at, you know, 7 in the morning, you know, hitting it. It was pretty loud. And then I don't remember what the scenario was on how we stopped that. I really don't remember what we did. It wasn't there that long, because the punk rocker guys actually gave me their half pipe. So we cut it in 4 pieces and then bring it over here and put it up in my backyard. So any of the pictures you see in the early days where I have a half pipe in my backyard, that actually came from the punk rock parties down the street, which was a super fun 8-foot tall, 8-foot wide ramp. And then actually prior to that, I had kick turn ramps in the backyard. So my parents were always really cool about ramps. You know, I built just kick turn ramps, you know, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That lasted, you know, a few months until I actually got the half pipe. And then once I got the half pipe, it was kind of on. But yeah, there was definitely times where me and my best friend, this guy Robert Aguilar, we'd play Mike Buff and RL every day, doing curb endos in the front of the house. And I always was Mike Buff. He was always RL. And that, you know, that's just what we did every day. And in the early days, we grew up in an area where there was like almost like ET, where there's houses being built everywhere. You know, I was the last house in my neighborhood, the last house on the left, and across from me, about a half a mile and about a mile down, was just all field. So in the early days, it was just riding in the dirt and riding. And then once they started building houses, riding on the jumps. And yeah, it was a blast. Every day we would ride till, you know, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night every day. And parents were pretty cool. You know, took my bike with me every vacation. And it was just early on, it was known by the family that, you know, I rode bikes.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. And so when, you know, when you've got a setup in the backyard, or you're in some dirt lot somewhere, you know, it's yeah, you're with your buddies and you're doing your thing. But tell us a little bit about like where you got recognized. What was the catalyst into someone going, hey dude, we want you to come ride for us? Or where did you make that jump into, this is more than just my backyard ramp? Or
Gotcha.
yeah.
So yeah, I had the half pipe I rode, but really no magazines or anybody had ever been here until I started racing. So I started racing. I was probably 12, 13. I started racing at the Pipeline, and then another place called Azusa Canyon. A couple places I raced in, several places around here, but about right when I was turning 14 expert, which at that time it was like the gnarliest class ever, I thought, which was because it was some of the pros that turned pro, some of the real gnarly dudes. And the Pipeline said, if you raced on Thursday, you can ride the bulls on your bike. And it took 2 Thursdays, and I never raced again. I started riding the bulls, and I actually loved. I mean, I dug racing because it was fun, but it was just, it was intense. It was just different, but it was fun. But riding the bulls just blew me away. And at that point, within just a few weeks, I was getting a lot of attention and people, trying to give me parts and give me things, and it was really weird.
I bet, dude. I mean, that whole era it was just amazing because thinking about like, yeah, the racing and there's so many stories. First of all, Azusa's, I mean, that's a world famous track, and you got to think like exactly what you were saying. You're racing against the people that were that are also now in the Hall of Fame with you for racing, and there's two things that I remember that our stories are parallel because we started out doing the same thing in my neighborhood up in Northern California, where it was like just dirt lots. And so everyone could find a shovel. And so you could go out there and build jumps. But then as the 80s progressed and the economic boom of the 80s and people were building houses, well, now you got construction workers, and construction workers were the unsung heroes of BMX, because those dudes, if you went over there and you looked like you were 10 to 12, and you just showed them a picture of a magazine with ramp plans, and you're like, can I have this stuff that you're going to throw away? And they're like, absolutely. And so, I mean, in our neighborhood, we had carpenters that would just they'd swing by on the way home and just like take a look at our ramps to make sure like, are they, and they were obviously horrible, but these dudes are like, all right, they weren't making sure they were safe. They were just seeing, do we need more wood? They were like, okay, I got that.
That's super cool.
Yeah, super, super rad. So I understand that. So it's almost like that progression there. But, that era kind of had you raced BMX, everyone kind of did BMX. But then at that point, there was that moment where you switched from, okay, BMX isn't my jam. I like jumping. So then all of a sudden, you're a freestyler. It was like you specialized, like you went to college and you're like, everyone takes the same courses. And then you're like, okay, I want to focus on freestyle. And then you're like, okay, I want to focus on vert, you know what I mean? But you started doing flatland. We all kind of did that. So I love that the way that we all kind of just went off. And I say we all because it's that all of us kind of lived through that same thing. You were on walls, but we all experienced this amazing chapter in our lives, you know what I mean? And I love that for what it is. So when you say it was weird, right? You started getting free stuff, you started getting sponsored. Do you remember, I mean, were you stoked? Do you remember what that feeling was like when you're like, you know what, they're going to give me a bike? Or was it like there was so many that you had options? What was that like in those early days of sponsorship for you?
So in the real early days, I had a friend, Steve Caballero. He was by the BMXer, Steve Caballero. He lived
Oh,
down
okay.
in Chino, and his family had a big dairy. They sold hay and had, cows and horses, big farm. And one of their kind of ranch hands was this guy named Dave Breed. And Dave Breed, we all know who Dave Breed was, who ended up going riding GT and being traveling for GT for many years. He saw me at the pipeline one day and kind of started talking to me, and he knew that I knew Steve, and we started building jumps into the hay. And so we started learning some, we wanted to do, some of the stuff we saw in the magazines as well, some Harry Larry stuff or some Timmy Judge stuff or whatever. So we started jumping into the hay. Well, that relationship kind of kicked off, and he worked, made much money, lived on a trailer on the place, and he ended up, buying me some parts and helping me out at the pipeline. And he kind of took me under his wing, and basically it was my first sponsorship. So my bikes were always pretty dialed. I mean, from the get-go, from maybe probably 3 weeks into riding the skate park, my bikes were pretty much always dialed. There was a company called Galindo. They made grips, and I think maybe like number plates. They tried to give me a bunch of stuff, and I took it, and, said I would try it out, and then pretty quickly, the Huffy thing came about. Within, I think my first or second contest, I did really well. I think Huffy approached me probably somewhere between my first and second contest ever, and it was a factory sponsor, and it was, I do know what bikes I rode then because they weren't Huffies, but that happened happened pretty early on. And then, I started doing some traveling, going to Ohio, going to their factory quite often. And I was getting, a small salary, but I was getting a salary. I'm just about to start high school or starting high school. And it was a trip. Actually, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I got sponsored by Vans first. And
Nice.
this was from 7th to 8th grade. Vans ended up sponsoring me and asking me to go on tour. And so when I did my finals in the 7th grade, went on the motorhome and with the fiberglass half pipe with Mike Dominguez, Martin, and Eddie, and we went on tour for about 3 months. That's I don't know why I forget that period of life, but that was probably the biggest, funnest tour, most exciting thing that I did in BMX by far up until that point. And just the fact that my parents would let me go, that tripped me out. The fact that we had a chaperone who was he drank Jack Daniels every night when he parked the bus. He put up wrestling pictures in his hotel room, and he was kind of like our chaperone. That blew me away that we were trusted. And then, mischievous Mike Dominguez and Woody Itson and Martin Aprio, we just kind of made do. And Everett Rosecrans and his 2 sons were with us, the skateboarders, Kelly and Beetle. And that was an eye opener on what really is out there within BMX and skateboarding as well. It was, and then breakdancing as well. We had break dancers too. So it was a wild tour. There was a lot of things that I learned on that tour, a lot of good, bad, ugly. But ultimately, I'm very blessed that I was able to go on that tour because it was crazy.
It's almost like you became a man on that tour, man. I mean,
Yeah, man, there's a lot of things that happen.
Dude, you're traveling with break dancers and so like, okay, so like Itson, Dominguez. Did you know those guys before the tour kicked off, or was it like, hey Brian, this is Woody Itson, this is Mike Dominguez, and then it was like, okay, cool, and here's a guy with the wrestling photos in the room and the Jack Daniels. Did you first of all, did you know them? And secondly, did your parents, did they look at that guy and know he was the chaperone and still let you go?
My favorite part, he said, kind of like a chaperone.
Kind of like
kind of like a.
Yeah, he was actually a good. I mean, he stayed sober, when he needed to, but when he didn't need to, he wasn't. So I kind of call that a decent chaperone, at least.
No.
My parents met with Everett, and Everett's a good talker, and he explained that we have a chaperone that's going to be with him, that's going to be driving, and Everett kind of did his own little thing. He had his own little friends that he met along the tour and did his things. So we had a motorhome. So we all stayed in the motorhome. And yeah, they bought off on it, and I'm grateful they did, because a year or two later, when Rad came about, they also gave me the green light, and I kind of denied it because I'd missed so much school and some of the other stuff. And I don't know why I did that, but I kind of did. And but ultimately, yeah, he was a decent chaperone. Ultimately, they bought off on it, and man, I can tell you stories all day long on that tour. It was very, very, man, it was memorable. Totally, you can talk to any of those guys that were there, and they could tell you 15 stories. Also, it was a good time.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear it. We're going to get to that. So let me get back to did you know Mike
Oh yeah,
Dominguez and Woody?
yeah. So Mike D was at the skate park several times in the early days. I think he came within just a couple of weeks of riding bulls as well. So I knew Mike. We weren't like necessarily good friends, but we knew each other. We rode together by that point. I knew Eddie by that point only because Dave Reed knew Eddie. But Martin and Woody, I didn't know that well up until that point. Kelly and Beetle, I met just for the first time on that tour. And we're all, I mean, every single one of those people I'm still friends with today. So it was a pretty tight knit group. We all became friends, and yeah, it was a good time.
What year was that? I mean, you
So
said
that was in 84.
84. So
84
84 was
83, 84, like school season.
Yeah, 84 was a big year for you. You had your first King of Vert contest, right? Do you recall that? Was that 84?
I think that was 85. So
85.
King of the skate parks, you mean?
Right. Okay. Was it King of Skate
Yeah, so
Parks?
King of Skate. So I started competing, but I didn't turn pro until 85. So I rode in the 16 and under King of Skate Parks prior to that, but I didn't turn pro until 1985, and that's when I actually went to Haro and I turned pro.
Gotcha.
So I rode for Haro, I rode for Huffy as an amateur, competed as an amateur, rode vans and Huffy, amateur stuff, and then once I turned pro, I went to Huffy and started competing.
Okay.
So yeah, but that was only the next year. I was only amateur for 2 years roughly.
I have a question. Do you ever look at those old bikes, right? The 80s bikes, and
Yeah,
for,
they're everywhere.
Here's what I mean. I look at for example, the dropouts. I look at the dropouts, and for flatland, I'm like, okay, yeah. But if I think about what you were doing and how high you were going, and how just not beefed up those bikes were, it blows. I mean, do you ever just look at that and go, dude, would you let your kids ride that bike as high as you rode? You know, in that, like, in the oververt, like the oververt sketchiness of upland and like pipeline. Everyone knows that's oververt everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Is
it
that
was
the one?
gnarly.
It's, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
do you ever look at those bikes and just think, Jesus, what did I do?
I do now. I don't know. I really didn't thrash too many bikes. Very, very rarely. I wasn't one of the guys that blew out forks all the time. I think I had a GX pedal break one time. I still never broke a pedal out of a one-piece crank, and I've done it several times out of a three-piece crank. I never thought about it because it didn't happen. I mean, we were riding. If something would have been sketchy, then I would have upgraded or changed. But we really had no issues, and I don't know if it's credit to Haro or what, but looking at it right now, you're right. They're tiny, tiny dropouts. Yeah, but the rims, I always rode Peregrines. I didn't, I got offered a lot of money to ride Skyways, and I turned it down. Half as much money to ride Peregrines, and I think that was a huge factor in my riding. You can put a 48 spoke rim with a ton of air pressure, and that was my key to going high. Land smooth with 120 pounds of pressure, and you're gonna blast. You just gotta land smooth.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all I really wanted to do. So yeah, I really can't explain it, but you're right. If I look at it, I wouldn't think that those things would stand up to what goes on or what went on.
I mean, it's amazing to look at. When I mean, that's just one of those things that maybe as an adult, I'm looking at the dropouts we have now and appreciating them, and just looking at how, and you see these 80s bikes and you're like, man, they flew like gods on paper dropouts. It just blows my mind. And then tell me a little bit about like the like pipeline, and because just watching it, like I've never visited. I lived up in NorCal, so my only experience to skate parks was VHS cassette tapes with Agent Orange background music, and watching just like the up and down, and you'd see through the pole. Like it was just like very 80s, almost like a car commercial. Like it wasn't cool video, but it was the coolest we had, and it was the only thing we had, and we loved it. You know what I mean? So what was it like back there? Like oververt, that's the stuff that we never even knew about. You heard it was gnarly, but to me, being 10 years old, reading those stories, it's like it's gnarly because it's cement. And then you get older and you hear from riders and you're like, no, dude, it was like 3 inches oververt in some spots, and how did you get accustomed to that? What was it? Was it just like, this is what we got, so this is what we do?
Kinda. There was a 15-foot bowl that had no coping at the pipeline, and it went up and it had probably 2 feet of vert. For fun, even as we were super young, very early of riding the pipeline, we would do like 4 or 5 foot airs out of that bowl, which was just gnarly. And I think about it these days, and I was like, gnarly. It was super gnarly. And then the combi bowl the round bowl was rideable, but you would have to, and I carve everything, because if it's going to be vert, I learned pretty quickly that if it's going to be vert, I'm going to carve. Well, in a round bowl, you don't carve too much. So I learned how to yank and carve a little bit. Not quite like pocket airs like nowadays, but to just carve like 3 or 4 feet, and I can land pretty good. And it was oververt. The round was rideable a little more than the square. The square had big humps in it, and it was way oververt, but it was flat, so I could definitely carve that. But yeah, it was gnarly, but that's just what it was. I mean, that was my home place. I rode there, probably 3, 4, 5 times a week for several years. And it helped later on in life when I was going to some of the contests, like the big Houston contest that had the big 2 feet of vert. That was like no big deal. I mean, everyone was stressing out, and it was like my backyard ramp. It was just super easy, just because vert didn't bother me. But yeah, it wasn't normal for everyone. So not every park had as much vert as Pipeline. Del Mar didn't have hardly any vert. Very few parks in California had as much vert as Pipeline. It was pretty burly, but I didn't know it was burly until later on.
Yeah,
So,
I bet.
yeah.
Do you think that attributes your, I mean, it must attribute to your riding style, Brian. Like, did that just like encourage your send it style of just huge blasts out of that bowl and everything? I mean, because you went to other places and I mean, it must have been like, wow, this is not like my home park. I mean, tell us about that. Was that something that built your style or your technique?
Well, I will say that once the Pipeline, I started hearing rumors that it was going to close. I thought, as far as my bicycle riding career, I thought it was done. I didn't think I was going to be able to, I wasn't a quarter pipe guy. The half pipes I experienced, I never been on a half pipe that was 24 feet wide or 36 feet wide. So I didn't even know those existed. But I just, in my mind, I was thinking, well, this was a good time. It was fun. That sucks that it's going to close down. I didn't really think too far past it, but yeah, I took everything I knew from vert riding at a skate park, and I adapted it to half pipes, and even quarter pipes. I learned how to go straight up and down. I didn't like it. I wasn't great at it, but I learned how to blast. And that's all from the early on, even the little punk rock ramp that all I wanted to do was go high, because that tripped everyone else out. So you go 4, 5, 6 feet out of a little sketchy ramp, it looks gnarly, and that's what I'd love to do. So everywhere that's what I want to do. I want to land smooth and go as high as possible, and I took that everywhere I went. And I still try to do it.
So when you went on that tour you were talking about, that first tour, I mean, what were you guys doing with that? Because I mean, were you traveling with ramps? Did you have ramps set up at the spots that you were going to be hitting in different states and different cities? Like, you're going from big bowl riding to probably demo riding, right? So
Yeah.
what was,
yeah, that was by far the sketchiest ramp. It was 8 foot tall ramp with no flat bottom. So it just folded up, and it had 1 foot decks on both sides. So it wasn't like you fly out, roll. There was no lip tricks, nothing like that. It was just, and as soon as you land, you're up the other wall. So super fast, super tight. But Pipeline from riding the half pipe or the full pipe, I mean, it didn't bother me. It was just a tighter pipe, and I adjusted, and Mike rode it well. I rode it pretty well, and it made for some good shows. But it's set up super easy. It just folded out. We never really adjusted it. Like, some days it was this side was undervert. Some days it didn't matter back then. We just figured it out and rode it. So
when did the hijinks start? How from when you guys got in the bus or the van, how long did it take for the games to begin?
So
and who started it?
I say as soon as we hit our first fireworks stand in whatever state, that's when it started. That's when it got loose. So we bought a ton of fireworks, and we had these poles from the ramps that we bring in the motorhome, and we had probably 3 windows on the passenger side. Well, we could shoot a bottle rocket from the 3rd window, and it would just hover like right by the windshield for like 4 or 5 seconds, and it would blow up if we were going 55 miles an hour. And we learned that. So then we got the big bottle rockets, and we tried, and we were trying to go like 80, 85 miles an hour to get him to go right next to us. And we caught a couple fields on fire that we had to pull over immediately and put some fires out. Mike Dominguez one time shot a bottle rocket at a gas station, and behind the gas station was this hill that caught fire. And I never seen somebody jump a fence so fast and pat out a fire, but he got it completely out and, you know, put the gas cap back on and we took off. It was a lot. There was one time we were at Hutch's property. I forget his name, Hutchings, Richard Hutchings.
I believe
Sorry.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Hutchinson.
we ended up doing a little thing at his area. So he invited us to his little lake house. And I don't know, remember who it was, maybe be one of the skateboarders, I think, shot one of the giant bottle rockets at his son on a dock, and it hit his chest and sent him to the hospital. So we weren't really liked by the Hutch family after that. They were cool, but you know, that was one thing. That was one no. And fireworks were definitely sketchy everywhere we went. If we got kicked out of a Denny's, we were going to shoot bottle rockets in the front of the store. If we got kicked out of a nightclub, we were going to shoot bottle rockets or Roman candles. We had a thing where we had chairs all the way around us, and we would all have a Roman candle, and we would light our Roman candles. Then we'd have to pass them around every time it's shot, and pretty soon we're dropping them, and just stupid fun.
Playing hot potato with a lit bottle rocket, right?
Yeah.
Great.
It was
Nice.
My favorite is like, this is probably the fourth story that involved Brian and fireworks and moving vehicles. Like that I have heard. You know what I mean? Like there was the other ones where it was like, oh yeah, we pull up to this nightclub and they shot into the nightclub.
I'll blame that one on Rich Segure. That was a Rich Segure situation, but man, it was awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it was.
Was there, I mean, like, and I guess this is like, okay, I remember it's always been like the Haro sport, and was there ever bikes that you were like, man, that's a dope bike. I would have liked to have ridden that bike or that geometry or anything like that?
Well, that's a tough one. I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
I was super happy with, my sponsorships. Even when I rode for Huffy, I never rode a Huffy. I rode the same Skyway TA that I rode in the skate park the first few times I rode there. And then I got a Patterson, XL Patterson, which I liked even more, and just changed stickers on that and made it my new Huffy. So, and then once I got on Haro, they were actually awesome bikes.
Yeah.
The only thing that they suggested to me that they wanted me to start advertising the FST, which is a shorter bike, and so they said that they would make me bikes that were the same size as the Sport, basically the same geometry, and I loved it. I actually posted a picture just the other day of where I'm riding a red FST. It's Pipeline. It looks like it's practice at a contest, and it's one of those longer
ones?
FSTs. And
was that an unstickered bike? Was that just a red? I remember you posting that picture up. What was the deal with that bike?
I don't know. Let me look.
Yeah. And it's so just while you're looking that up, was that a thing? Like Isaac, when Brian was just talking about when he rode for Huffy, he didn't ride a Huffy. When he rode for, you mentioned you got a Patterson and then restickered it Huffy.
Yeah.
Like, was that something that was a thing because Huffy didn't have the right bike for you to ride for your style, or was that just an agreement you had?
So that was so Huffy was in the, so that was something they told me to do, but they were in the works of building, bike shop worthy bikes. So Stu Thompson had gone on when I did, so I think he joined in '84 as well. Gary Hazelhorse was on the team already. So they were in the works of building like good bikes. It just didn't happen when I was there. So I was only there a short time and I was out.
It was a really popular thing in BMX in the race world of BMX, where people would ride just someone else's bike with a whatever sticker, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
well, they still do it today. I mean, even in the Olympics, like Mike Laird is fabbing up bikes and people will put like mongoose stickers on and stuff. But
yeah, so
I was just thinking, like with Brian's situation back in the 80s, it was like, wow, did Huffy have a bike that he could ride, at Upland? Probably not, because they were all like maybe, I don't know. At the time, were they like mostly department store bikes?
So they were, yeah, they were Walmart type bikes,
Right.
Sears Roebucks or whatever. They were big, store bikes, but they were not in bike shops. And that was their goal. I remember thinking it didn't make sense to me, but now it makes sense to me when they were telling me they want a bike shop worthy bike that they're going to sell in bike shops. And I thought, whatever that means. But, later on, I understood what they meant, but it never happened. And I don't know if it ever happened ever, but they had a program for the next 4 or 5 years, some big racers. And I don't know if they got any more freestylers, but yeah,
I can't say I recall seeing a Huffy freestyle bike per se. I mean, Isaac, do you recall one, or do you?
I don't. Yeah, I don't. I mean,
Brian?
I remember the huge like marketing push between when Huffy did that with Stu and Brian. Like they went hard on people. I mean, I think even like Todd Lyons wrote for Huffy for a minute. Like
yeah,
they tried for they tried for that entire initial chapter of BMX and freestyle. They
Yeah.
went hard. And honestly, dude, I mean, I don't know, I'm guessing, but I think it was probably just a lot of competition between them and Schwinn, because they were both like in that same kind of market. But I remember Schwinn had their own retail stores, and so that's where I think Huffy was like they couldn't compete with Schwinn. I'm guessing, dude, but that's
Yeah.
just the way I remember it.
Well,
But
it was
I
a-
mean,
it was a big
fell
company.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge company. They had like riding mowers and they had a lot of other things that I mean, they did swing sets, and like I went to their factories and they had all kinds of stuff. Actually, they gave me a pretty cool riding mower that I never picked up or never had sent out here. But now that I think of it, but they had so they survived with other stuff, and their
Yeah.
bikes. They probably sold, I mean, they sold a shit ton of them. There's Huffies everywhere. So I think they did well until BMX kind of took off, and then they realized or they tried and it didn't happen. I don't know, but
Yeah.
Maybe there's something like you said, like, is when you have a department store bike that's wildly like popular, like Schwinn, Huffy,
Mongoose
Murray, and
now,
stuff
yeah.
like it. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't think Mongoose, but I'm saying like to get
Early.
but to get a bike store or BMX shop store, bike store, whatever, shop bike, until that happened, I'm sure that was kind of not the downfall of Huffy, but it was like, well, you can get a real BMX bike.
It didn't help that, like, yeah, you'd see Brian, but then you couldn't go buy that bike. And if you did see a Huffy, it was in like we didn't have Walmart at the time, but it was in like a Sears, or it was in like a one of those like
JC
department store where you didn't want your bike from them. You know what I mean? So they had half of it, right? Because like at that point, we were all waiting for the Huffies to hit the bike shops, but it just never happened. And who knows what was going on behind the scenes. It's there's a lot to it. But Brian, I always ask this of every guest. Did you keep anything? Did you keep bikes, jerseys, leathers, stickers?
Yeah. And yeah. I kept so this is a house that I since I think I moved to this house when I was probably 5 years old. So definitely every BMX memory, everything was in this house right here. I bought it off my parents a few years ago, and there's stuff that I found here, the suitcases and big crates of stuff that I never knew I really had or didn't remember I had. But I have like a bunch of pipeline trophies that I kept, like 10 of them that were kind of cool. I definitely have a bunch of wheels and tires and a handful of bikes that. So the one thing about one thing about Haro was when I went to a contest, I would give my bike away just about every time. And that was something that Haro was cool with. And it was something that, I didn't want to take it back anyway. Back in the day, I would ride my bike to the airport, check it in, and then I'd, give it away and I'd get a ride home. Or sometimes I'd bring it back and ride home. It was just something I didn't have to bring home. So I gave away a ton of bikes. And I think I probably, they always wanted you to have a fresh bike. And so we're traveling so much, just stickers get messed up. So, I gave away a ton. All my entire neighborhood had Haro bikes at one time. All my friends, my family. And so those are the bikes I got back. Some of those people realized that, I didn't have any bikes, or I didn't keep any. and I got probably at least 5 bikes back that mean something to me. That's kind of cool.
That's dope, dude. Yeah.
But,
Do you, I mean,
but
you kept jerseys and helmets and all that stuff
I
too?
have a bunch of jerseys, and I don't have any, like I wish I had the Bell Moto 3s from the pipeline. I don't have any of those, but I have a couple. I have a Haro helmet. Um,
Do
yeah,
you want,
I have a, what's that?
you can fix a long-standing question that Craig and I have about those helmets, dude.
Which
Okay.
one?
The Bell helmets, not the Moto 3s, but do you remember the Bell helmets when they came out? They were the open face ones. They were white, and the one, I think the retail ones had diagonal
Like the maroon
stripes.
stripes? Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
But I think the Haro team, I think you guys were issued ones with stripes that went around the back, or at least I've seen Wilkerson with that one. Do you remember what ones you had?
No, all the ones that I had were the ones that had the stripes on the side. There was like three maroon stripes that went down.
Yep.
The only ones that we had different. Let me go grab one.
Yeah, dude. Craig, you know I've been dying to ask this. We've talked about this like 3 times on the audio podcast.
It's the best part when we get our questions answered that we've had for the last 40 years, right?
Right. But
there's no better way to do it.
Yeah. If you're going to ask Brian Blyther a question, what is it? Can you confirm this question Craig and I have debate about when it comes to the helmets? Yeah, we're going to get all kinds of comments. You had Brian Blyther and you wasted it asking
these
about
are the helmets that we rode for a while with the little round visor before the you're talking, but the same helmet.
Yeah.
So this is just the same helmet. It's just painted different. And this one's a painted one for like, I think the 2012 Worlds or the 2009 Worlds in Germany.
That's incredible, dude.
I don't have any. I don't think I have any of the other helmets here, but I probably have 1 or 2 somewhere, and I bet it's probably in a storage. I have a couple storage units that I keep.
It's pretty not ironic, but it's kind of cool that you have a lot of this at the house that you grew up in, or at least from when you were 5. And Isaac earlier mentioned Bill Batchelor, and Bill, like your time capsule there, Bill popped a time capsule open last year, which included a ton of photos of you. I mean, he's got a book coming out pretty soon, but have you been involved with Bill? Were you involved with the book that he's working on? And if so, like, what did you think about all these new fresh photos coming out of you and your buddies and stuff like that? I mean, was that something big that you guys were a part of with Bill, or how did that go about?
So Bill was one of the dudes that just one of all of us. There was a handful of us that rode the pipeline. There was 10 or 12 people I seen all the time. Bill was one of those kids that was there all the time, and they started taking pictures, and I could care less. We're all riding. If he wants to do stuff, if he asked me to do something, I would do it. Bill's just Bill, and he was a cool kid. And I remember he started a zine, and I went to his house a few times because his house was right by the Baldy Full Pipe. And so if you go up to the Baldy Full Pipe, Bill's house was on the right, and we'd go to the end of the street on the left, and then jump the fence, and that was the Baldy Full Pipe. So he lived right above Pipeline. I will say that some of the pictures I see, I don't remember that, but I know that me and Bill did a lot of little shoots or little riding deals, or he took pictures everywhere we went. A lot of times when you see him take a picture of something, there was 4 or 5 of us there. So
well, he had a pretty not crafty or clever, but it was what he did was really cool. Like he said, he would tell us, I'd call up so-and-so and I'd be like, hey, let's go take photos somewhere. So they'd end up in like a Long's Drugs parking lot, doing flatland, or he'd go hang out. Like if it was, it wasn't a day at the bowl, it wasn't a day at Pipeline where the unis are on and John Carr is out there and Osborne's out there. It was just like, you guys want to go hang out at this dirt track and do fun stuff? And Bill would show up and take photos of that. Did you get involved with anything like that with him?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a picture where kind of like Isaac was saying, there's a picture where I'm just like jumping in this dirt field, and Bill took it, and I really don't even know where it's at. So there was a lot of little hidden dirt jump fields around here that we all knew about. So Bill, we would go session 4 or 5 different places in a day. I do remember that. I just don't remember, if someone told me a story, I remember, well, yeah, we used to ride together. I wouldn't remember he took photos. I remember that he was one of the dudes we rode with and went to a bunch of different places all the time. I'm stoked. I mean, I know now because I see all those pictures. I'm stoked he took pictures, but I wouldn't have remembered that he was a photographer dude. I knew that he took photos for his zine. I know he took photos, but Bill was the dude I rode with all the time. He was a rider.
That's so dope, dude. Yeah, I got to point this out to you because I actually bought one of these from
Yeah.
Bill, which is the let me get it straightened out there. But there's Brian.
Is that the bike
On,
with no stickers, or is that the picture he's talking about?
That's the one I thought had no
yeah,
stickers.
I think so. I think let me get in close, but yeah, I mean, it's
Oh, yeah,
I
there's
can't even
stickers on
get. Look at that, you guys. The height on that is
Yeah, that's rad.
crazy. And then there's a signature in here. I love memorabilia, dude. That's why I'm pointing this
Yeah,
out. I love that stuff.
Yeah, that's a cool photo. This is
Now,
this one's another, I don't know if you can see that, but that's another photo from Bill. Is that blurry?
yeah.
But I zoomed in and there's stickers on this bike too. So I don't know. But this is the bike that I'm talking about that was longer. This one was definitely a longer FST. It was the same size as the Sport.
That's awesome, dude.
I'm not sure about that other bike, but I'm pretty sure that's the same situation.
Probably
Roughly the
yeah.
same time, yeah.
Yeah. Dude, okay, so tell me about your legendary flatland career. You know what I mean? Like that, I'll be honest, man. There's two tricks that I think are probably my favorite as far as the way they felt. And it's got to be like something. I mean, I didn't ride ramp the way any of you did. I mean, I could ride up, and then I could do a 180. I could do like an alley-oop, nothing above coping. Because the first time I tried to go above coping, I looked at the coping, and I don't know what it is I don't know if it's everybody, but if you go up a ramp and you look at the coping, you absolutely stop spinning at whatever point your eyes look at the coping. So if you're going up and you look right here, you're just going to fall. I don't know what it was, but so I know the sensation, right, and the feelings of some of those tricks. But for me, tail whips and boomerangs were my favorite tricks. I was a flatlander.
Yeah.
And so tell me about the tail whip, first of all, but then follow up. If you look back at your career, what was your man, I just like to do this trick the way it feels. I don't care how it photographs. I don't care if it's just you by yourself and you just want to feel stoked. What trick is your go-to, yep, this is it?
Probably that they call it, or I don't know who named it, but like the B-tuck air, where I'm just like super high and boner my front wheel. I think that's actually that's actually kind of taken a little late. But I used to like to bone my front wheel. So if I'm over the coping, I can see the coping straight under me. I would push my bike as far over as I can. And that felt so awesome to me. It was the coolest thing. And I remember as I'm coming down, I'm already starting to adjust. And as soon as I come down, I place my front wheel and I pump as hard as I can. And that to me was the funnest thing that I looked at every single time. There was times where, you don't hit it right, and you're not as far over the deck as you want to be, or you're too far. But I had all this room to play with. I kept my back wheel right on the coping, and I played with my front wheel. And so the back wheel always landed, just under the coping. The front wheel I'd place, down as soon as I could, right at the coping. And there was a lot of times I'd hit coping front and back wheels did it? But to me that's what I'd love to do. That was a favorite part about riding, was just doing airs and being in control of my front end. That was super fun to me.
That's probably why I was so smooth, though.
Yeah.
That's probably why you're so smooth, was that front wheel control. That's because, Craig, I mean, when you think of ramp riders, right? There's something about the guys that started out doing skate parks. Because even if you look at Enchanted Ramp, even in the later years, when it was that's not a mega ramp, but to us that was a mega ramp. At least it was the first time I'd seen a really wide, big ramp, right?
Yeah.
But you would see those guys, you know what I mean, like Andersons and Seguras and you and Mike and Ron, and there was definitely a big difference in the way that those big ramps got rode versus the folks that you I guess would just assume probably just rode wood their whole life. You know what I mean? So would you say that those big ramps that you benefited from coming up from the bowls and the cement.
Yeah, 100%. I think I got all my control, all my, you know, the years of riding the pipeline without even knowing it or without even trying. I got my control and my, you know, I don't know what you call it, my gusto, my no fear of going high. And I did everything I could possibly do to get hurt at the pipeline. You know, I had some issues. So what's, you know, you ride in the pipeline, every transition is different, everyone's weird, and I was able to go high there. So what's wrong with a perfect half pipe that's the same transition all the way across? It was super, it was super easy to ride and super fun to ride. I
Yeah.
just I just rode the way I wanted to ride. I wasn't a, you know, I would say that I could have been a much better rider for contest wise, but I love going high. I love carving. I love doing my 5 tricks. And, you know, luckily other people liked it, but that's truly what I wanted to do and what I like to do. It wasn't that, you know, I wasn't trying to, you know, not win or not compete or not try hard. I just, you know, I did things under control. My style of riding was different than a lot of people's. I love watching a Jay Miron or a Volker or you know, some of the dudes that were even Ron. You know, Ron's sketchy. I love watching sketchy riders, you know, that blast and do crazy stuff. I can't ride like that, or I don't ride like that, but I like watching it. That's for
Speaking
sure.
of like wild style riders, especially at the pipeline, did you ride with guys like Steve Watson or were you down there a lot with Eddie, and like who were you eyeballing or who were you watching? Like, dude, like what made Brian Blyther just jaw drop?
So I would say Eddie. Eddie was pretty rad, but Eddie was one of those riders that was very, he was tricky with his tricks. He didn't want to, you know, there's contests, you know, 3 months from now or next month or 3 weeks from now. And he was like hiding some stuff and not doing some stuff. And he would only do things. So I would hear him, he did this or did that. And then I'd ride with him and he wouldn't do. So it's kind of just, that dynamic was weird. Me and Mike weren't like that. Me and Mike just rode. You know, everything I'm going to do because I've been doing it for the last 3 weeks. You know, I'm not, there's no secret tricks in my book, but it's not a bad thing. It's a GT way, and GT was a little sneakier than at least me.
Right.
But I liked watching Eddie. Eddie was super fun. I liked watching like Steve McLeod. He was the dude that would like fully carve and then, you know, jump off a knee slide half of his airs. That was pretty interesting. Mike D was always fun to watch. He always blasted. But there was only I can't think of too many riders that, you know, I bit my style off a lot of skateboarders. So Chris Miller, Lester Kasai, were a couple guys that I watched ride the pipeline, and I just took their lines. You know, this wall here that's super sketchy. If you can just do a 3 4 or 4 foot air out of it, it you know, it breaks up a run. You don't have to go straight up and down the whole time. You do a little air here, you do a little air here, you air in that little pocket over there, and those are the things that I like doing. The hips, I always like airing on the hips, and so my styles were always different. It was just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then I'll blast too. But I liked watching everybody that was there. I got a little bit of like Jeff Carroll was another one that rode all the time. Robert Aguilar, a good friend of mine, he rode all the time. There was this black kid, I don't remember his name, but he had no fingers on his right hand, and he blasted, rode the pipe, and super good. Bunch of kids that never really took it any farther, but it was always a fun session at the pipeline. There was always
Locals,
people to
man.
ride with. Yeah,
Yeah,
locals.
locals. Dude, I guess like thinking about that stuff, there was always and Craig, you laughed a little bit too. You're like, right? Dude, in my neighborhood up in NorCal, the great debate was Haro versus GT. And it was kind of that way. Like Hutch was like Canada. Like you were like, oh, okay, you ride a Hutch. But if you rode like a GT and like the Haro, like I was a Haro guy. So I rode a Haro Master. But if you rode a GT, it was like, I mean, it was like you're picking rival teams. It was nuts, dude. Did you, when you say like, yeah, it was kind of the GT way, were you like, man, F GT? Or were you just like, whatever?
It was like the Crips and the Bloods.
It was, dude. It was like, It was like there was definite like feelings of like animosity between like the two like my best friend rode a dyno, but I could like you're like, okay, you're fine because we ride every day. But some new guy on a GT, it was just like, who's this guy on a GT? You know what I mean? It was like that.
They were like, and it wasn't just the GT riders, although Eddie was one of those type of guys that would hide his tricks, but I still don't fault him for it. It's just part of competing.
Yeah.
He's a different competitor than I am. But their team manager was a guy named Sean Buckley, and Sean Buckley was a somebody that I never liked. I never liked his style. He said some things, some harsh things to us when we were really young that I never really forgot. And he was all about winning at any cost, and would do some shady stuff. So I just attributed, some of those people to GT, but ultimately the two people that started GT are great people.
Yep.
I like the company. I like, Dave Volker's one of my best friends ever. Ruben, Robert Castillo are GT guys forever. They're still some of my best friends. So we always hung out with GT on the road. The traveling teams, we always met up. Haro and GT would always hang out. But in the early competing days, yeah, GT was a bit of a headache. Their ads were always, Haro and them have a little war. It's just a little competitive war. It is what it is. It didn't bother me too much. But it got a little political. Like some of the contests where, me and Eddie like tied, and then it would go to Eddie because or whatever reason, or some of those things I didn't agree with, but it is what it is.
Can we say what the other reason? Can we say like what the other?
I don't know. They took a score from either another contest or another. I don't know what it was, but yeah. I can't give you a perfect example. But
didn't Bob Morales own Dyno?
Yes.
I don't. Okay. I'm not saying. I'm not saying, but like I'm.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take anything from Eddie because Eddie's a great guy.
Yeah.
I'll call him the king of the skate parks. I don't care. It's just, it is what it is.
In the grand scheme of things, Brian, and just to kind of turn the page on this, we were talking about the contests, some of the politics involved, and, looking back and retrospectively, like the era ended so quickly. I mean, it didn't last very long. And what was the indicator for you, or did you just feel like things were falling off? And then at what point did you go, oh shit, this could be to where I might have to go job hunting or do something else? Like where were you at during that time? And when did you really start noticing that?
So I think for me, it went all the way until they were trying to get Matt Hoffman on Haro. And they were asking some other riders to give up some of their salaries and trying to budget, trying to get some money. And they were going to cut my salary. I don't remember what it was. And just being too proud or too stupid, I said, you can have all, I'll resign. You can have all my money. You can give it to Matt. That's fine. And I left Haro. And it was kind of something, it was very similar to that. It was very short, just easy. There was no animosity, but at the time, I hadn't gone to any of my, like, let's say a prom. I hadn't been home for a summer since I was in the 7th grade. There were some things that, I'd come home from tour and hang out with my friends that I've known forever. And I can't really explain to what it's, I could say that we did this, we did that, but they can't really understand fully what was going on. And they were telling me stories that, what was going on there. So I was okay to hang out at home for a little bit. If I have to get a job, I have to get a job.
Yeah.
It was a mistake, I would say, because I missed it. I missed it pretty quickly. I went and worked for 4 or 5 years, and I went back and did the whole GT thing, basically being a carny and doing fair shows, which was a lot of fun. I did that for several years, but it ended, and Ron still did contests. I would still go watch. I became more of a fan, obviously. Because I wasn't doing the traveling, I wasn't going to as many contests. But Dave Mira popped up, at that time. Matt was popping up. So there was definitely a lot of cool stuff. Jamie was coming out. There was all kinds of stuff to watch. I just wasn't competing.
Yeah. I do. Here's something that I've always like, and I can only relate it to like me personally. I remember, I was having a blast doing Flatland, and the flatland progression turned from like hopping and tail whips and boomerangs into scuffing tricks. I lived in NorCal, so I was right there with like Aaron Dole and like just that whole scuffing scene that was up in NorCal, Carl Roth and those guys, Vander, all that. So scuffing I was into, right? I'm like, okay, cool. This is dope. And then Kevin Jones came and I was just like, I can't, there's no way. Like I remember I blew my knee out trying some trick that RL had done. And I'm like, I was just too, like, for me personally, I was too scared to try a lot of what Kevin was doing. Cause I'm like, rolling and balance, like that was new for me. I was like,
Yeah,
this is crazy. Do you remember like seeing Matt Hoffman and were you like, did you have that like, shit, that guy's going fucking far. He's going way up there. Did that happen? Because I've heard other pros say like, you know, who was it that kind of, maybe Grosso. Grosso was like, he was talking about the Enchanted Ramp Day, the naked run.
yeah.
And he's like, he goes, dude, my car just broke down. And then Matt Hoffman. And I was just like, okay, I get it. You know, did that happen? Did that happen to your, like your era? Because I kind of look at like Grosso was like the second, you would be the first layer of like the guys I remember doing big airs, doing ramps. He wasn't like, to me, I don't remember Grosso doing like, you know, skate park stuff. So that's like that second generation. So the first generation, did you guys look at Matt and go like, dude, what? Did you ever have that like,
So
oh my God moment?
Matt was Matt could have turned pro a year, maybe two. I mean, he could have turned pro at 14, right? I mean, he was pretty gnarly. So Matt is I think he's 2 years younger than me, possibly year and a half. And Matt entered a Irvine 2-hip contest as an amateur and won, and then he turned pro at that contest and won that. And I ended up getting second. I wasn't bummed. I knew Matt was gnarly. I totally, and I wasn't trying to get any better or anything. It's just early on, Matt couldn't put a run together. So I didn't really feel a threat. He would do a big trick and land bottom and he couldn't keep the speed. And, you know, to me that in my eyes, being able to do a whole run on a half pipe and keeping your momentum is pretty important. But once he learned that, or once he could pedal and get the speed, or once he's doing 4 tricks in an air, it didn't matter how hard he landed. Then I was like, oh dude, yeah. I knew he was on his way.
Yeah.
And then Mira was, you know, not far behind him doing his, you know, miracle stuff. So the writing was on the wall that there's some heavy hitters that were there. And, you know, I tried to do a 900 a couple times. I thought it was a cool trick. I thought it was possible. I never landed one. Mike's landed a few. But yeah, there was definitely a time where I realized, and you know, the problem with vert riding, like you see someone like Jamie, what's Jamie, 50 years old? I don't know, but he's as good as he ever has. You know, we were washed up at about 20 or 21, when really that's your, you know, from 20 to 30 it would have been probably my prime if I would have just stuck with it. Not saying I would have beat Matt or anything like that, but definitely it's not too old to be riding. But the industry stopped, you know, things kind of happened. It was just unfortunate, I guess. When I came back a few years later and riding vert for GT, that was fun. That was super fun. I was getting to, you know, I was doing shows at different areas where I got to see some of, you know, I got to see Mira a few times, or Jamie or Matt, and still be riding for doing shows. That was cool to me. That, you know, hey, I'm still riding, still having fun, still doing shows. Don't have to be a, you know, top 10, you know, contest rider. Although some of the X Games in the early days, I could have qualified at least in the top 10. But if I'm not going for, you know, if I'm not going to win, you know, what fun is it? So I never really did any of that. I did some Soul Bowl stuff where it was, you know, 2001 or 2002. I entered the Soul Bowl a couple times just to do it. I got talked into it, and it was fun. You know, I made it to 10 feet in the high air contest, so I was stoked on that. But
incredible.
Yeah, there was definitely times where, you know, it definitely obviously new blood has to come in at some point. It was awesome to see, and I was stoked because you think about it, and these are some of the raddest dudes ever. So, you know, how could I be bummed about that? You know?
Yeah, there's
100%.
definitely been ebbs and flows in the sport. I mean, you pretty much have stuck with BMX, or at least had a level of participation on some level, right? So with things going up and down, like you're still involved with BMX today. Tell us about that. What are you doing? I mean, what's what interests you? What events do you go to? What's your riding like? Just give us a real
So
quick rundown.
the cool thing about nowadays, at least I think is pretty cool, is we started or we designed the slow ride. So the BMX slow ride is a 24, 26, and 29 inch bike that me, Mike Dominguez, and Xavier Mendez started, and Haro gave us a lot of support. We were going to do it on our own type of deal, but why? Why did we really need to? Haro, Haro's got the marketing. Haro can do everything, so we kind of gave it. We kind of all worked on it together. I'll say it wasn't like we started. It wasn't like it was just kind of we all worked on it together. And the cool thing about it is every bike that's sold, money for Mike, myself, and Xavier goes into a pool, and we just let Haro keep it, and that's our traveling fund. So we have all the money. We've never got paid for any of our bikes. Like my 2015 signature bike is one of those bikes. The 24-inch Blyther bike is one of them. The one with the tough wheels. All those bikes sell. Money goes into our pot, and we get to travel. So we went to Hawaii a couple months ago for Big Island's birthday and wedding. A bunch of skate parks out there. That was a good time. We're going to Ohio in a couple weeks for one of the Mike Buff ride outs.
The Buckeye Bike Show.
Yeah, the Buckeye. There you go. So yeah, we're gonna go to that, and we pick and choose kind of what we want to do, but we're gonna go to 2 or 3 events a year. For this, the upcoming years. We have plenty of money to do it, so we have a budget to keep on riding, and
that's super cool, man, because one of the things, like, I hope you remember this, a couple of years ago, meeting at Mike Buff's house for the 4130 Subway Series, I was generally kind of surprised and stoked to see a lot of the guys like you and Volker and everyone but Pete on a bigger bike, right? Pete rode a 20-inch during that ride out, so I was like,
yeah,
of course he did.
Of course, Pete
of course he did.
Right? But yeah, I mean, first of all, congrats on working with Haro on that slow ride. So that's what I want to talk about. Like, so you obviously you're still involved with BMX, but what do you think about the big bike scene as far as, when you go on those big rides, 300-400 people in LA, is that something that you're like, dude, I'm down with this? Or what is it about it? Of course you're out there riding, so I know you're down with it, but what is it about that scene now that you like the most, I guess you would say?
Well, I think it's almost like it's not like the fixie scene, but I mean, it's a way to get people on bikes. You see whole families, you see groups of dudes, you see chicks, you see everybody, kids. It's awesome. And everyone's cool. It's all chill. It's it's an iconic place where you're in downtown LA going from Hollywood, and cool scene, cool scenery. It's awesome. I mean, there's nothing that I don't like about it. The train ride back where everything's genius. It's bitching. It's a super fun ride. You get down into Beverly Hills, and you see cool shit and talk to weirdos on the street, and it's rad. But I really believe that I could live in any big city in America and have a very similar feeling. I mean, there's ride outs in Houston, Texas, or Philadelphia, there's ride outs everywhere. The big bike scene is everywhere. I mean, it's huge in the inner cities everywhere. So I truly believe everyone can do it. I mean, if you live anywhere within, whatever, an hour and a half of the city, there's rides. And if they're not, there's probably rides in your town.
Yeah. I mean, look at Bob, they're doing the Haro 40th anniversary of the Freestyler with Bob as kind of like the headliner on the flyer, man. I mean, that itself shows you that, the tides change, and anybody can have a ride out, and you can.
Are you going to that, Brian?
All your friends again.
Yeah, I think it's in July, right?
Yeah, July 2nd. Craig and I are going. Are you going to go?
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah.
Dude, hell yeah. That's going to be dope.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm super.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Dude.
That's a good one.
Dude, I don't want to, I want to come back to big bikes, but I fell on my head a lot. So if I have a question, I have to jump on it real quick. So this is gonna be out of left field. Two things. What I love about your bike, the slow ride. And Craig, you and I have talked about this on the podcast. It's such a cool nod, but if you look on the chainstay, you guys, it says BMX, and Blyther, Mike Dominguez, Xavier, BMX is on like the chainstay. That's sick, dude. Like, to me, that's such a cool like throwback. I saw that in the bike shop, and I'm like, I had to explain to my wife, right? I'm like, she's just like, it's BMX. I'm like, yeah, but it's, you don't understand, that's initials of like three legends that happen to
So
make up
let me
BMX.
tell you, you know the story on how that happened, or how we
Nope, but
started
I
that?
want, let's hear it.
So we were in Huntington Beach for me, Mike, and Xavier, Huntington Beach for a contest of some sort. It was a long time ago, but I think it was towards the end of us riding, at least competing. And I can't remember. I wish I could tell you what contest or even the year, but it was a long time ago. And we went into this Mexican restaurant, and the chick says, how many and who's again, what's your name? And we all said our name at the same time. I said Brian, Mike, and Xavier. And she goes, oh, I'll just put down BMX. And that from that day on, we realized, oh crap, we're BMX. And Xavier kind of took it on the most. It tripped me out that she said it. Me and Mike kind of laughed, and Xavier, it really tripped Xavier out. And so 35 years later, 30 years, whatever it's been, it makes sense now. So the bike,
Dude.
yeah, the BMX slow ride makes sense.
That's like, I mean, that's as cool as a 40. That's as cool as like the 43 number that we've been living on, thriving off of like there's just the randomness of like, oh, these three dudes hanging out that are legends, and it happens to be BMX. Come on, dude. God has this. There's a God, and he has a sense of humor. And if you're curious, there you go. That's how you can prove it.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. What was it like, dude, being because I look at it like y'all were kind of child stars almost, really, if you think about it, dude, like that fame, all that fame being so young. And for those of you that maybe are a little bit younger than Craig, myself, and Brian, the magazines back then, like, there wasn't social media, and you couldn't just call your friends. So you've got all of your news and your updates from magazines. And if you think every kid in your city had a BMX bike, and every kid in your city had some type of either freestyle or a BMX bike, we all read the same magazine. So these guys were literally stars, like beyond compare in our industry. And the thing about it is, in the like pop culture, I guess is what you'd say, like everybody knew who you were, really. You think about it. Dude, what was it like growing up like that? Growing up where just everybody, like, for a comparison, like Craig and I go to a party, and it's like, who's this guy? You know what I mean? And you show up at a party, and it's like, that's fucking Brian Blyther, dude. You know what I mean? Like, what was that like growing up like that?
So I mean, it definitely, if you're at a bike event or a BMX, whatever, yes, you're gonna get noticed. It wasn't like I'd be out with a girl and I'd get like stopped at a restaurant, sign autographs at a restaurant. I mean, can I say it's ever happened? It's happened, but it's not something like you're not a movie star to where you can't do stuff. It wasn't
Right.
that kind of feeling. But you go to a race, or you go to a contest, you go to an event, people are going to recognize you, and it was very cool. And I'll have to say, everyone's got, from the new riders to the people that your age, and everyone's got respect. Everyone's super cool. It's just, I mean, it's not hard for me to go. I'd go. It's not like a Trekkie deal where I'm, these weekends where I go and sign stuff and go hang out. Believe me, I was a dude that would go to your house and ride your ramp. I'd go have a barbecue with your family. I would go to your bike shop. I did all those things. And I will say that's one thing that the Haro team did. We went to barbecues. We went to shops afterwards. We went and hung out with people, and we did that every single night. And
Yeah.
it made a difference on those shops asking us back the next year. All that stuff was huge. But anyway, I would say that I never really thought much about it until we were starting to do like MTV and the whatever that MTV I forget what the dance show was on MTV, but we went and danced on MTV for like 5 episodes. They film a bunch, and we wore all the same clothes, every single day. So we did like 4 or 5 of those, and then once Spike got on the scene here, and all the the various magazines in New York City. We did, once I was on the Swatch tour, they put ads in, Vogue and all these different news. And then, so there was interest in all kinds of different cultures and all kinds of different levels. That was kind of trippy. So it was definitely trippy. It was definitely cool. We got to do things, the things I got to do as a bike rider blow me away. I've been to, every state a dozen times. I've been to 56, 57 countries. I've hung out with some superstars and did some very cool stuff that bike riding is allowed me to do. And bike riding opened my eyes to all kinds of stuff this world has to offer. And I'm truly blessed. I try to show my family. I travel with my kids. I get to go to these, bike events. I'm taking my daughter to Ohio in a couple weeks. To me, that's the best. I mean, I get to actually spend time doing these things that I like to do with my family now.
Yeah.
So traveling to some of these countries and some of these places with my family, it's kind of like my first time being there because I didn't really do any tour stuff. All we cared about was riding. I can drive by somewhere and say, I remember riding there, or I can remember riding there, but it's a whole different vibe now. But
it probably gets real too. Like when you're, because your kids, you're like, okay, Dad used to ride bike, and every once in a while you like Dad's biking friend, but like, you go to like a Buckeye and there's like a line. Why are these people lined up to talk to you, Dad?
Yeah. It's that kind of stuff trips. My daughter's 17, so she's going to be a senior this year. She's cool. She rides. She knows. So, but it's gonna be fun. I mean, it's just another ride that it'll be fun to take her. So, summertime, why not?
And shout out to you and all the guys who are from your area or other eras that do go to these events, the Buckeye Bike Show, Old School BMX Reunion. I think we were talking on the Haro episode that we had a couple months back, and we were asking you guys, can people still come up to you? They, this, and you're like, dude, yeah, that's what we love, man. It's like, there's still, even though like Isaac and I are pushing 50 years old, when we get a chance to hang out with you guys, we're instantly 14 again. At Mike's house,
Us too.
Yeah, no, that's dope. I mean,
No,
I remember,
I
was like, I saw you and I was like, man, I got to say something to Brian. So you were talking earlier about the 24-inch FST, which I own. They only made 100 of them. And I was like, hey, Brian, like you and I were in the line for the bathroom and I'm all, hey, Brian, I got your bike. I got the 24-inch FST. And you're like, right on, dude. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And it's just those things that you guys, I'm so thankful that you guys are still involved with BMX because there's a lot of us out there, just either doing this podcast, showing up to a bike event for, the Buckeye or whatever. Those things matter to not only us, but I can see that you guys get a kick out of it too. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Well, thank you guys for what you do, man. It gives me an opportunity to come out here, and it trips me out that people want to hear about what we went through, but I get it because I trip out on what we went through. I mean, I want to hear my story because I don't remember everything. Dave Volker says it often, we hit our head a lot and we don't remember, but I'll go to the old school jam or the Woodward and I hear someone tell a story and I vaguely remember it, but I love hearing how much fun we had. There was all kinds of cool stuff that
who's the best storyteller? I mean, out of all is it Volker?
Volker's a good storyteller. Ron Wilkerson, believe it or not, is a good storyteller. Ron Wilkerson is out of it as he is. He can tell you a story and do a sub story and a sub story, and you think he's never getting back, and he'll go, oh yeah, I'm back, and he'll go right back to where he was. I watched him do I don't remember where we were in Chicago. I don't remember what the event was, but a BMX thing where he was like the headliner, and he talked for probably 2 hours, and I was fully impressed. It was super good,
dude.
But yeah, Dave's good. There's a bunch of good dudes out there that could definitely talk.
Yeah, I'll
Dave's
echo
not a good
that
storyteller because he doesn't remember shit, but what he does remember, he's good at.
Dude, Dave, here's what the crazy thing about Dave, like for me growing up, I remember Dave's balance tricks, right? And so it was like the Gumby and you'd see these like balance power moves. And then I'm watching him ride now and I'm like, bro, I had no idea you had this whole plethora of tricks that are like insane that he will link together. And I'm thinking, and this is no joke, I'm not joking. Like, I haven't ridden with Dave personally. I've only seen clips, but I've seen clips of him like goofing off and having fun. And I think I've maybe 9 times in my entire life have I seen Dave touch the ground when he's riding a bike. Like, he just doesn't touch, dude. Like, his tricks are all dialed. It's crazy.
Let me plug in real quick.
Yeah. So I have tons of respect for Dave. And then just to echo the thing about Ron, dude, his storytelling, I did the same thing. Like, Joe and Dave have the Factor Freestyle podcast, which you guys go Google that, follow them, subscribe to Factor Freestyle. They did a Summit 43 where it was like you paid $43 and you got 3 like Zoom weekends of like, one was with a trainer, but the keynote was Ron Wilkerson, and it just said 2 hours with Ron Wilkerson on his philosophy on life. And I thought, this is going to be over in about 10 minutes. But exactly what you talked about, right, dude? Like, he went off on 5 different, like, he started with like a thread, and that thread, like a tree trunk, went out, and then somehow it all came back, and you're sitting back and you're like, Ron's not crazy. He just wants you to think he's crazy.
Exactly.
Like, because then he can get away with whatever he wants. But that dude is brilliant. Like,
yeah,
he's absolutely sane. He's sane as fuck. He just wants you to think he's crazy so he can do whatever he wants. But that dude he's brilliant.
Yeah, I trip out on his storytelling because he's exactly, that's the one thing that I took out of several times I've heard him talk.
Yeah.
Like he's you know, since his coma, he'll talk to you this far, you know, he'll get right in your face and he'll spit on you, and you think that he's you know, lost it, but you hear him talk and it's like, you're right, he's brilliant.
Yeah, 100%, dude.
Yeah, he's a trip.
I'm gonna leave you with one last question. And this is probably the hardest question, but let me frame it for you. My question is this: when you look back, dude, at just BMX now through when you started, what is your favorite memory? And to help you kind of frame that too, is like, if I talk to Craig, which I do weekly on our podcast, and Craig and I didn't grow up knowing each other. We met 3 years ago, but he grew up doing BMX in NorCal, and I was doing flatland in NorCal. And what I realized is we all have the same stories. We all sat and drank a horrible name, but we called them suicides. But it was like, you go in, you get a Slurpee, and you just run through the entire line of sodas, and you would just make your own soda. And then you'd sit out front. If somebody bought a magazine, you'd pass it around, but you would just talk about sessions and what you just read and contests and stuff like that. I don't remember the tricks I did as much as I remember hanging out in front of, like, sitting on a parking curb. And that's BMX to me. When I look back at BMX and why I spend stupid amounts of money on nostalgic, pictures of Brian Blyther and autographs, because I probably talked about, like, with my best friends that I grew up with, we talked about like that VHS. Like, I think I had a 15th generation dubbed copy from, some dude's like stash of VHS tapes of, like, King of the skate parks and all of this. So, like, when you look back at BMX, dude, what is it that kind of grounds you, and what's your favorite memory?
Well, I'd have to say that there's a couple, but my earliest memories where I just would leave the house and go ride with some dudes and go wherever. We have an auction that's down in Dairyland. We have we would actually, it was almost like spin the bottle, but not spin the bottle, but we would just try to decide which way we're going to go. We would actually figure out which direction, and we would go. We would ride for 15, 20 miles, and those times were priceless, man. It was a good time. We didn't do much. We rode a lot, but it was super, super fun. And I cherish all my neighborhood friends and people that I still get to see still to this day. But I would say the things that as far as my BMX, maybe career wise, the early Haro days where Haro thought it was genius. Well, Haro thought it was good to put me, Ron, and Dave, 3 totally different people that come from different walks of life, and put us in a van with a random, announcer, and go do 68 shows in a 3-month period. And it's insane that we were able to click. It's insane that we were able to get along. And some of those experiences, like just being on the road with those dudes for months and months and months, um, was unbelievable. It was a dream come true, only because we all love BMX the same. We all absolutely cared about what we were doing. We absolutely wanted to do good. We wanted to. There was some certain shop owners that we wanted to go. We don't have to be anywhere for 12 hours, so we'll go to the shop. We'll barbecue. We'll hang out with your family. We'll drink some beers, do whatever, and then we'll just not get a hotel and drive. And that was something that we would all have to agree on, but we did it every single time. We may have a day off and we'll stay in, whatever, some little town in Connecticut to go ride a ditch that these kids said we should go check out. Sure, well, let's go check it out. And we will go, we'll jump, and we'll hang out with you guys. And those kind of things were special to me. Every year we wouldn't stay in a hotel for a couple nights so we can splurge to New York City. And we had a good time. We rode all over New York City. We would spend the night in the city, and just some of the things that we luckily got through and experienced, and none of us ever got killed, is a bit of a testimony. But the vibe of us three, it was truly only about 5 years, and it was over. But it almost seems like, I toured with those guys for 15 years. It feels like. I feel like we were in a rock band because we see each other and we do things together, and we still do shows together. But those 4 or 5 years on Haro were definitely impacted my life, and those are some of my best memories of BMX, I'd say.
That's great, dude. I love that. And it's so relatable, right? Because like Craig and I laugh about this all the time. Your first story about just jumping on your bike and going riding. Like, I think every listener of this podcast has done the collect call. And y'all, for those of you that are young, before you own the cell phone that you can call your mama on, like, I would ride from my house to like 2 cities away and realize, like, I'm not going to get home before it's dark. So you'd call, like, you'd have to make that collect call, like, and the operator, collect call, what's your name? And so then your mom would pick up the phone and be like, do you accept a collect call from Mom? Come pick me up on Mike's. And
that's like a jail call.
Yeah. Mom, I went to golf. Come pick me up at Ron's. That was like your, and then she'd be like, no, I don't accept. And then 20 minutes later, your mom would show up and like yell at you.
Yeah, but it was free.
Yeah, right.
She didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah. So Craig,
Mom, I'm in jail. Come pick me up. Bail me out.
Mom, I'm in Laramie. I threw a French fry. Oh, it's so good, dude. All right, Craig, any final questions you have for Brian Blythe?
I most definitely, typically, Brian, when it gets to this point of the show, I have no questions, only comments. But for you, buddy, I've got a question. On the Haro episode, which you were a guest on with Wilkerson and Nori, you guys teased, or I'm going to say Wilkerson started out saying there's a possibility of a 2023 Haro comeback tour. Is that still in the works, or was that just a wishful thinking thing? Have you guys talked about that at all? Go.
So I'm going to say no, because it's 2024.
2024.
But yes. Sure. So I don't know how far along they are, but I still get texts from Dave saying that he's still working on it. There's still things going on.
Yes.
So I retire in May of 23. And so I'm cool with anything after that. And so it's supposed to be, whatever, like a 10 city, 8 city, 5 city, whatever it is, tour to where, we go do a show, and it's kind of like it's kind of like a party. It's kind of like you pay to be involved in the whole festivities, the whole night type deal.
Yep.
And I think it's a great idea, but I don't know any more about it.
And just so you know, I'm volunteering right now during this episode on the air to be the new chaperone for the tour.
Yes.
Yeah. And you guys, I hope this happens. I believe it's going to happen. We will absolutely, Craig and I will absolutely help promote any GoFundMe opportunities. And I hope that you open it up and let us try and try and fund our cities. You know what I mean? Like say,
There
hey,
you go. Why
you know,
not?
like if we can, because like, look, I could get all my friends to kick in $10 to have you all come out and like hang out for a day, dude. We could easily make that happen in Phoenix.
Yeah.
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
that's what it's
So
about. I don't think it's we're not looking to make money. We're not looking to, we're looking to pay minimal expenses and have a good time.
yeah,
It's something that we love to do. If we can get together and go hang out and party with our friends, how awesome is that? I mean,
It
that's
is, and I think
yeah.
fireworks are legal in Arizona, so
No,
they
there you
absolutely
go.
are.
Yeah.
Fireworks are legal, and I will expect like at least a 10-foot air on your slow ride with that
Nice.
front wheel out.
So
That would
as
be
long as the
serious.
ramp's 8 feet, I can get 2 feet out of it, no problem.
Dude, braver than I am. Braver than I am. Go ahead, Craig. I cut in with that, but go ahead.
No, man, I think Brian answered everything, man. No, man, just shout out to you, Brian. Thanks again. We just big props to you for coming on the show, being a special guest tonight, dude.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, it's been so much fun for everybody who showed up here, who's in the live chat right now and has been able to enjoy this, man. We're glad that you came here tonight and shared your stories with us, Brian. Amazing guest. Thank you for your time. Isaac, go ahead and take it from here.
Yeah, man. All right, you guys. Hey, July 2nd, if you're able to make this happen, if you can head down to Oceanside, there is a ride for the Haro, was it the 45th? It's 40th. 40th anniversary of the Freestyler. Bob's going to be riding. John Bolgens is going to be there. Brian Blyther is going to be there. You can ride with Brian. You can talk about, you can ask him about Laramie, Wyoming, please. But you can ride with all these folks that you grew up with. They were on your wall. Maybe you went to a local bike shop and saw them there. You can actually go ride with them. So July 2nd, they're riding from Oceanside to Cardiff, and there's going to be some Haro beer, I'm told, that's there. You could buy some branded beer. It's going to be cool, man. We talked to John Bolgens about it, and it sounds legit. So make sure you head down there, hang out. Craig and I will be there as well. Swing by, say hi to everybody. But Brian, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for just thanks for BMX, man. Thank you for my childhood. Thank you for the stories that you told Spike and Wendy and Oz all those years, and John Carr. Thank you for all of that, Bill Batchelor. But dude, just thanks for being like that dude that always you look at some riders, and I never really felt like I was intimidated by a lot of riders, man, because they were so good. But like you, Dave, and Ron, y'all carried yourself where it was like, man, if I saw Brian Blyther, he would want to ride with me. Versus totally. I always looked at everybody else like I want to ride with them, and you proved it over and over. So thank you for that, and just being who you are and what you've done for BMX, man. We owe you just so much gratitude, and thank you so much for all you've done, man. And thank you for giving up all those summers and proms and all that stuff, dude. So we could watch you tuck airs and do everything that you did for BMX. So thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I had a blast and totally appreciate it. And I definitely will see you guys in July. All
right. Craig, take us out, brother.
Yo, everyone. Thanks for showing up here at Big Bike BMX. Again, a super shout out and big thank you to our special guest, Brian Blyther, to everyone in the live chat and everyone who's listening to this on our streaming podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. We love you so much. Thanks for supporting Big Bike BMX. For Big Bike BMX, I'm Etnies BMX Craig, and Isaac, back to you.
You guys take care. I love you all. Thanks for hanging out in the live chat. Brian, take care, brother. We'll see you in July. Ba, ba, da, ba.